Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realms continuing coverage of MUFON Symposium 2023, coming to you from Covington, Kentucky. Our guest in this segment is the amazing Earl Grey Anderson. He is the state director of MUFON in California. You were the field investigator of the year last year as well, correct?
Oh, thank you.
If I recall correctly,
it was
Symposium.
It was something like that.
Yeah.
Volunteer of the year, I think it was. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's something that a lot of people misunderstand and really don't understand, is that there ain't a paid person in MUFON. Like,
Nope.
it's all operating costs, and aside from that, everybody is a volunteer. Every field investigator, every state director that's here attending meetings, all volunteer. And that's really, really important to get across, because there are so many others out there that are not in that way. And when you give to MUFON, like, this is what it's going to. It's going to field investigators. It's going to training processes, things like that. Even the new amazing MUFON University that Mindy Topfist is spearheading. I cannot wait for that to launch. I'm getting ready to go through field investigator training myself.
Good for you.
Very excited for that. I'm in the Austin area. There are not a lot of us right there.
We need you. We need you.
Exactly. And, you're also on the Experiencer Resource Team, which I am hugely, hugely a fan of. We have Sev Talk on the show regularly. She's been coming on for years and years. And to know that team has come about and exists is fantastic. Let's get into that a little bit, because MUFON, of course, is known as the scientific endeavor, has been since 1969. Really the first people to put forth a unified reporting system across everywhere. This is how we take a report. This is how we bring in evidence. Very scientific in that right. The Experiencer Resource Team hits a different side of the UFO gym, so to speak. So let's get into that a little bit, Earl, and how you came to MUFON to begin with.
I'd love to talk about that. And I'm so proud of the ERT. That's our little acronym. It was originally the Experiencer Research Team, right? MUFON is about research, and I think that we're the best in the world, as you were saying.
I would venture
volunteers
to say,
were in this for love of the phenomenon. But we became the Experiencer Resource Team because that better explained exactly what we do. It served a very personal purpose in my own life, because I had an experience with our visitors.
Yeah,
I'd been trying the sort of like the CE5 meditation contact thing, and I was kind of being flip about it. I was a new field investigator. It was about 8 years ago, and it worked maybe a little too well. Because I wound up having entities literally come through the wall.
Wow.
Which is scientifically inexplainable.
Earl. Wow.
And there was nobody to tell. Okay, nobody, because it was about research, and I kind of told my state director about it. And he, God bless him, Jeff Krause, he's one of my dearest friends, and still, I consider him my original mentor. But he didn't have a background in the experiencer phenomenon. And when I told him that this had happened, he didn't really know what to say. I think that he felt uncomfortable with it. I felt uncomfortable. There was no place to go. There was no answers out there.
There's no nuts and bolts to it. It's not like going and taking a soil sample or reading or anything like that.
It's physical.
Yeah.
But it's also it's psychological as well.
And very spiritual in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to how you process experience. The numerous experiencers I've talked to, it's the fact of it steals their life in a different way, whether positive or negative at the beginning.
Dr. John Mack from Harvard, who was head of the psychology department and one of the first guys to take the experiencer phenomenon seriously, he came up with the term ontological shock for those who have had this. And it's a very specific form of PTSD that people who have experienced contact have. And what it means is that it's sort of like we have our idea of reality, and we've lived in this all of our lives with our concepts of it, and that is pulled out from under you like a rug.
Yeah.
And I know personally the way I felt. I felt completely ungrounded. I felt like lost in space.
Yeah.
You know, in the movie 2001, where you see Frank Poole, his body is spinning around, and there's nothing to latch on to. That's how I felt. And how all experiencers feel, whether they've had a benevolent experience or something more malign.
Yeah.
And I felt confused. And there was no place to go.
Yeah, and even the fact of talking with family about it, it does a number on a lot of people.
There's
Earl.
a ridicule factor.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, even a loving wife, things like that. Like these things can drive wedges in families. The example I give all the time is Terry Lovelace.
Yeah,
like he and his EMT buddy. Like when you ride as an EMT with someone, that's like riding like a cop.
Yep.
Like that is your partner, man. You are in the trenches. You see things. And they both had that experience, and it drove a wedge between them to the point that they eventually never spoke again.
That happens.
And it happens in families. It happens to a lot of people, sadly, because it's hard to come forward. It can be hard to tell your experiential story.
Well, what happened for myself is that I talked with Peter Robbins about it, who's, he had worked with Bud Hopkins, and he was helpful. But again, I was a researcher myself. And but I knew about Kathleen Marden. I knew the Betty and Barney Hill history that she had. She was their niece. And I eventually contacted her. She was the head of the ERT at that time. And we had lunch together. It was actually at the very first Alien Con in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
We met for lunch, and I told her what had happened to me. And rather than eye rolling or putting me under lights and a camera trying to find out, lie detectors, she was a non-judgmental listener. And she had heard the story before, and she was able to give me answers. And I finally felt some grounding, that I wasn't alone in this weird, strangest element to this phenomenon. And I'll say, I don't think that our visitors are here to do air shows. They'll do them.
Oh, sure.
But they're here, it's a personal phenomenon. I think that they're trying to actually change humanity at a very basic level, because we're way up here technologically, but we're still acting like a band of
children,
renegades,
straight children, straight children with matches.
And the best way, I think what they do is that they hit you hard right up first, scares the hell out of you, but then people, what's very strange is that people start getting downloads of arcane information.
Yeah.
And it changes a person, and I think that they're trying to perhaps save humanity in this way, and it's one-on-one. Yeah,
and it is very much the way it's been described to me by experiencers, the fact of the box is opened.
Yes, Pandora's box.
Yeah,
it can't be
well,
closed.
it's the fact of you've been living in a box.
Yeah.
And you never realized it.
Exactly.
And the box is open now, and there is a whole world that you were not aware of.
And it could be this beautiful transformative thing.
Sure.
And that's what it became for me.
Yeah.
But it took that non-judgmental listener who, and she introduced me to other people that had been through the same thing. And after about an hour conversation, I mentioned to Kathleen, I said, I might actually want to join the ERT. I have a background in healthcare and psychology, and she, maybe, could I have like an interview or something? And she starts laughing and she looks at me. She said, "What do you think we've been doing for the last hour?" Shakes my hand, says, "Welcome to the ERT."
That's Kathleen.
Yeah, God love her.
She's an amazing individual, and one of those that I quote all the time on the show. That her aunt Betty Hill told her, like, "Honey, this," and at a young age, "Honey, this ever happens to you, you keep your mouth shut.
Oh yeah.
Don't you tell anybody. This will ruin your life."
Yeah. It often does that. I mean, it certainly did that for the Hills.
Absolutely. And, it was a much rougher time for experiencers. They were brave beyond belief to come out with their experience. And so much of their case is still, like, mind-numbing and jaw-dropping. When you start looking at DNA evidence off dresses and just the star system to begin with, and the fact that we didn't even know about it.
Yeah, Zeta Reticuli, I think. Yeah. The astronomer found exactly where they were coming from. They were showed a star. Betty was showed a star map.
Yeah.
And the astronomer was able to figure out what stars she was looking at in this 3D sort of, holographic image. Back in 1961, they didn't
know what a hologram was.
Nope.
The Who wasn't even using lasers yet.
No, won't get fooled again.
That's right. But in all sincerity, when it comes to experience, your experience, Earl, what was your sensation like as the experience happened to you? Because, like you said, this was an invited experience for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yet still a frightening one.
Yes, it was. I was very naive. I had read, the literature. I had read Bud Hopkins.
Sure.
I had read, I think, mostly... I think Turner, I had read her Carla Turner's book.
Okay.
But, just enough where I had a smattering and an understanding of it. And what I was hoping for was I would meet, like, Valiant Thor or the tall,
sure.
The tall Nordics, and that they would take me on a ride and show me, the answer to the cosmos.
Yeah.
And instead, what I got the little gray. I sound like the girl from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
But anyway, but I got the. My wife always brings that up, and it's a laugh.
Well,
for us.
there I was.
But it was like four of the little gray guys. I mean, they opened a hole in the wall and they came through. Right, there was no taking me away anywhere. They do house calls apparently, and that's what I got. They took blood, and they took blood, and they kept taking blood, and I'm trying to communicate with them, and they're non-communicative. They were not communicating back. So I started getting scared. I thought I was going to be like one of those cows that they find alongside the road, because they weren't giving me the calming message.
Exsanguinated.
Yeah, that's exsanguinated, exactly. But what I mean, they took, I think, energy and blood, and that blood is DNA. I mean, I mentioned to somebody they didn't take my DNA. It's like, well, what do you think blood is, Earl? Yeah. I had somebody that had written papers on cancer treatment and things like that, and so a serious person, it's like they took your DNA. They took a whole lot of it. And then they left the same way that they came in. They kept staring at me. The room was still flooded with light, but they were drawn backwards, almost as though like they were on ice skates, or I mean, I think they must have been floating like a millimeter off the floor or something, and they just stood there, and they pulled back. The wall closed back up again, and that was my experience. It scared it. I went into fetal position. I mean, first of all, I screamed, I yelled, I shook my wife, who was dead to the world through the whole thing. She had her own experience.
Were you able to move or anything like that? No.
After they left, it still took about 5 minutes before I could move. And I'm a retired nurse right now. I was still working as a nurse then, and I took care of quadriplegics, and that's the one thing I don't want to be ever, But they rendered me quadriplegic for this, and I understand, I mean,
sure.
I would have fought back. I mean, they looked quite fragile, actually. You could have broken their neck probably by grabbing them, and. But, I mean, they were all business. And the small grays, I think that they act robotic, and maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe they're biological robots that are churned out for a job,
Recently at the remote viewing conference, I was speaking with a pretty famous remote viewer, not to be named, who was telling me that he has remote viewed the fact that the grays, specifically, that yes, some of what we have is reverse engineered technology, but specifically given to us by them because they have bred themselves to a point, Earl, that they are no longer individual. Creativity does not exist in their culture. Well, it's also the fact of they have this amazing technology, but because they are of hive mind, they have no way to come up with new application for the technology. They've lost all creativity and individuality. So they're using us and giving us the technology as a conduit to come up with new uses for their own technology.
That makes sense.
It's like, that is actually brilliantly simple and amazing. And when you think about the concept of the grays and the idea that, yes, they are of hive mind, most of the time, whenever you hear the stories, whenever you hear accounts of them, things like that, it really does make a lot of sense.
It does. Well, it didn't. My experience didn't end there. This seemed, what I started noticing was, first of all, I started experiencing synchronicity after synchronicity. Meaningful coincidences would happen. My intuition went through the roof. I was able to connect the dots from case to case. It made me a better field investigator is what it did.
Awesome.
It raised my consciousness level as well as my vibration. I mean, we hear that a lot. That's part of the trifecta of messages people are left with is raise your vibration. The other two is stop trashing the world and nuclear weapons will destroy you. Stop, using them. But the other things, they call it the Valet-Davis effect, where an experiencer is oftentimes left with gifts that we often attribute to the beings themselves. Maybe they're turning us into aliens, kind of,
Sure.
And it's not a bad change. I mean, it became this compassionate thing.
Were you intuitive before?
Not like that.
Not like that?
No. It seems like, I feel like they activated something that was there.
Well, and one of the topics I've been bringing up regularly on the show is the idea of, yes, people being affected by their experience, having long-lasting effects, whether they be health effects, whether they be a vibrational shift. And when you're talking about that kind of technology, even the kind of technology that it would take to open up a portal in a wall.
Yeah.
It's
real. I can tell you.
That is some high vibrational technology that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And much like if I took a earth magnet and stuck it here next to my mechanical watch, it doesn't have to touch it. It just has to be in the field of it for those cogs to become magnetized and to change and be affected permanently.
What a wonderful allegory. Absolutely. That's exactly what happened.
Anybody in the presence of that technology, the way you vibrate and the way your molecules move, they're going to change.
Yeah.
They're going to have a physical change to them.
Now, I think a lot of experiencers, that they go through this horror. It's like a Buddhist monk will hit the new acolyte in the back with the blunt end of the sword.
Yeah.
It seems like they're going to be killed. It certainly hurts, but then that stops them in their tracks. And then they're finally able to stop thinking their old thoughts, and they're able to learn this new way of living. And it seemed like it was something similar that happened to me. But I think that some experiencers, they never get past that fight, flight reaction.
Fight, flight, or freeze. People forget the other F, the freeze.
You're right.
There's the freeze,
deer in the headlights.
The deer in the headlights of what is going on. I don't know how to react. Yeah. And that is more than frequently the case with anything paranormal, is that the freeze takes over, and frequently you can't even process the situation, much less what you're seeing. You're lucky if you remember gross detail or fine detail instead of gross detail. Yeah. Now, as far as experiences, it seems very common that experiences run in familial lines.
Yes, they do.
That once somebody has contacted, other people in their family tend to be contacted. You actively just had that situation happen to you.
Yes.
Like within the last 24 hours.
Yes. Well, to start with my mother, she was in officialdom, and she actually worked in a deep underground base back in the 1950s.
A noodle in the alphabet soup.
Yes, and she and that when I was 5 years old, she thought I was safe, that I would forget, right? And she told me where she had worked, and she told me, the addendum to the conversation was, and oh, by the way, UFOs are real, son, and life in the universe isn't abstract. We know.
Big.
We've already met them. They're never going to tell the public. So my mom had an experience when she was a young girl with a intelligent Foo Fighter, is what I think of it as, where it waited for her. It came into their screened-in porch in Iowa, hovered over her sister, hovered in front of my mom. My mom was awake.
Wow.
And then it pushed its way back through the screened-in porch. And my mom got up and she ran after this. It waited for her in a cornfield, like 30 feet in the air. And when she got under it, she just looked up at it, and it just stayed there, hovered for a few seconds, and then popped like a soap bubble. And that was a contact experience. And this often happens with people. They experience differently than we do, and I think that they knew that my mom was going to be working in officialdom. She knew that she was going to be involved in all that. So that was the first contact experience that I know of in our family. There may have been more. So, and then I had my experience. I wondered, somebody last night asked me, so have anybody in your family, like your children or your grandchildren, have they seen a UFO or had an experience yet? And I had to answer, no, not yet. And I'm not sure why not. My son really wants to see a UFO. He saw a drone on flash mode once, and he was all excited, and I had to burst his bubble.
I break a lot of hearts on social media, Earl.
Oh, me
I break
too.
a lot of hearts.
I hate it.
It breaks me up inside.
Well, I got a phone call from my son this morning. For him in Sacramento, it was 2:30 in the morning. For me here in Kentucky, it was 5:30 in the morning. I was getting ready to...
You're a good father to pick up the phone at 5:30 a.m.
I thought it was probably a butt call, right? But I did pick it up anyway. And I was going to be hosting the Experiencer Resource Team's workshop that we had, where people are asking questions and telling their stories. And so anyway, my son, he's on the other end, and he's all kind of breathless, saying, "Oh my God, Dad! Oh my God! I'm seeing one finally." My girlfriend and I, we were meditating, doing kind of a sky watch, and these two bright objects, I thought it was Venus at first, maybe another planet, but then they got brighter and came closer and closer. And he said, and it's still happening. They are spinning around each other. They're doing like a light show for me.
Wow.
And then he said that they pulled way back into the distance. And then they came back again, and then they're doing the same, and like the falling leaf motion that we see in these cases. And I was so happy to tell my son, you know what, kiddo, that is not a drone. That's not SpaceX. Congratulations.
Yeah.
May the circle be unbroken.
That's it. And like you were saying before the show, the fact of... these are very personal experiences. When you have a sighting like that, it's not like a mass sighting. Just before we came here, my wife's cousin called me up. Was like, You're the only person I think I could tell this to. And told me about an experience that she had the night before in Massachusetts on her balcony, seeing something come within 150 feet of her house, a huge orb.
Wow.
Disappear, come back.
Like my son.
I told her, I was like, you need to go on to MUFON.com immediately.
Yeah.
You need to put your sighting in. And honestly, folks, it's more about confirming somebody else's sighting than it is about confirming yours. And I think that that's really the important thing, is to understand that when you give your story, even I had a guest, Father James Cloud, comes on. He's an exorcist. He gave his account from like 1973.
Wow.
When he was a kid.
Oh my goodness.
It changed his life. It was something that he's never really been able to get out of his head, and he was like, I just decided it was time for me to tell my story.
Wow.
And apparently there were a couple other sightings nearby that happened. Like, all this stuff is cataloged by you guys, everything else, so it can all be cross-referenced by date, location, direction, all that kind of stuff. So it is never too late to give your sighting to MUFON.
I had one case that came in that was from the 1950s. It was two little boys at the time playing toboggan with a cardboard box down ice plant, down an embankment. And they're doing this, and they see this silver chromed, it looked like a missile, but it was hanging 7 feet off the ground. The back of it was just cut off straight, like you know, somebody had cut it with a laser saw or something. And they watched this thing, and they're waving at it. Okay, the kids are, they're kids. They're kids.
They're kids.
Look, oh wow, look, they're space people. They're waving at it. They go back up to the top of the hill, and they toboggan down again, and they watch this thing go to a 90-degree angle and shoot off. Well, this is a historic case. We're talking 1950s. You may not think that's relevant. 2 months later, I got another case that came in from San Diego. It was two old codgers my age, right? I'm 65, and proud of it. But they were riding their motorcycles up in this mountainous area, and they had the exact same experience. Same vehicle. This thing was silver. It was chromed. It looked like a missile. It looked like it had been cut off on the back.
Wow.
It was 7 feet off the ground. They stopped their motorcycles. They were standing there agog watching this thing.
Yeah.
Again, it went up to a 90-degree angle, and it shot off. Now, those are if not for that guy coming forward, 60 years later telling his story, I would have no reference for that sighting that happened, now it's been 2 years ago, right? But this is why the historic cases are very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're hugely
It's a continuum,
important.
you know?
Yeah, and I mean, even the fact, out of the MUFON bookstore yesterday, I bought this book, Natural Phenomena. And it was, I'll have to show it to you. It's pretty epic.
Yeah,
man.
I want to see.
It's literally like a binder full of studies.
I want
ball
that.
lightning, things like that, like back to the 1890s, man. 1700s. These reports.
Chris Auerbach wrote a wonderful book with Jacques Vallée, Wonders in the Sky, and it goes back to, brings up the Nuremberg sighting from, 1300s.
Yeah, the wood cuttings and everything else have been done of. The huge battle.
Yeah, this is no new phenomenon.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. Like whenever I talk about crop circles on my show, the example I give is whenever someone's like, they were proven to be fake. Well, some of them were proven to be fake by two dudes who said that they faked them. However, those go back to the 1500s, known as devil circles. And what's funny is in the 1500s, I think they were much more worried about not getting the Black Plague and actually living than to destroy half a field of crop for a prank.
Yeah.
Like you'd have been burned at the stake by the community if you did that.
Exactly. No. This isn't, our visitors' first rodeo. I don't think that this is the first time that they've tried to uplift, a civilization that was going in the wrong direction. And I think they've been here forever. I mean, Giorgio could sometimes, stretch a little bit, but on that we both agree. They've been here a long time.
Yeah. A couple more questions before we let you go. Number one, where do you fall in the camp of friend or foe?
Oh,
Earl.
I turn it back on ourselves. Our humanity is humanity friend or foe? Are we good or evil?
Yeah.
We fall somewhere in the middle, usually, right? I mean, we have our angels and our devils. You look at our history. You turn on the news.
Good actors, bad actors.
You'd think that we were all demons turning on the news. But, we have our Gandhis and we have our Hitlers, and I think that it may be the same thing in the greater cosmos.
Sure.
But I do have the feeling that the good guys are kind of overseeing things. And I think that, they probably diverted asteroids that could have destroyed us at certain points. So I think ultimately it's good. That's where I align with that. But it's not all, Reese's Pieces, right? I mean,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's some dark and scary stuff out there.
I say it regularly on the show. Despite where anybody comes to with their experience, paranormal, ET, UFO, cryptid, what have you, there's very few of those stories that start off with a song, Earl. They all more start off like a Disney movie. The first 5 minutes is not pleasant for somebody.
Yeah. Bambi's mom.
Yeah. It starts off with some kind of trauma.
Well, what I was saying earlier about the Shaolin monk, to get new acolytes' attention, will take the blunt end of the sword and have them get into position like they're going to be beheaded. It's part of the initiation process, and there's fear involved, and there's pain.
Yeah.
But that stops the person in their tracks, and then they're open to this transformation.
Even whenever you look at Masonic ritual, I'm a Knight of Columbus. Even whenever you look at our initiations, whenever you look at just about any initiation into a knowledge society, so to speak, there is some kind of either personal pain involved to get to that point, be it through ritualistic ingestion of something or like you're saying,
no pain, no gain.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, even the fact of them knocking you in the head, like Hiram Abiff, whenever you join, like you're dead now, you'll be reborn into a new knowledge. And I think that's very much, at least what I've gathered of the experience or side of things with UFOs, that very much seems to be the message.
Yes.
Is that they eventually realize the fact that they are reborn and have a chance to do things in a totally different way now, that they've never been able to do it.
I think that that's probably the gist of hopefully what I'm doing out there.
Yeah.
Is I want to help people get past that fight, flight, and frozen that you were talking about. The 3 Fs. There's probably a fourth one, but we can't say it on that. But I think that's probably the gist of what I'm, because a lot of people get stuck in that fear phase and they never get past it. But there's this whole world that will open up for you if you've gone through this. And just speaking personally, I mean, my son's sighting is so meaningful. It's
beautiful, man.
And I feel like
just to see your joy for him experiencing that is beautiful.
In Yiddish, they have the term cavelling, and I've been cavelling all morning.
That's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
One last question, because you did say that your experience was self-initiated. I've always been curious about the CE5 protocol. I've got the app. I've never been to a CE5 gathering. I've spoken to numerous people that have taken part in the CE5 protocols and been there and had experiences even. But where do you come down on the concept of CE5 experience and what it is that the ERT does? Have you guys seen an uptick in cases because of CE5? Have you seen,
I think so.
Have you seen?
There's been an uptick, and we're very, very busy. I mean, you know, we'll
you
get
guys are
like
insanely
100
busy
cases
with
in a
ERT.
month. You know,
it's
Dr. George Medich. I love the man. He is our fearless leader, and he doesn't get enough kudos out there. But you know, he's usually kind of quiet, but he just a powerful guy, knowledgeable guy, knows more about the experience or phenomena than probably anybody out there, than Kathleen Martin, and he was Kathy's choice.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about the CE5 thing this morning at the meeting. Somebody brought up Dr. Greer and all that. And our feel, George and I are pretty well aligned about this. That yes, it does work. Yes, you can meditate, and you can draw them to yourself, and you can do it yourself. You don't have to go and pay thousands of dollars to do it. But yeah, it does work. I mean, I'm living testimony to the fact that it does work.
Well, and you know, I guess one of the things that we talk about on the show regularly is the fact of charging an atmosphere, so to speak. The idea of are we possibly manifesting things because of our intent?
Yeah, well, you're bringing up my dearest buddy, you know, Greg Bishop's idea of co-creation.
Yeah,
and I absolutely I see a lot of truth in that idea that the manifestations that people have are oftentimes that induce themselves, but it's also coming from this other side.
Sure.
And it's sort of like where we meet with this other.
Well, and the example I give is remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
Quite literally, the whole concept that consciousness is non-local.
That is non-local. That's physics.
Can visit and view anything. Like my audience may be tired of it, but I bring up the 9th grade science concept all the time of we are all 90% empty space.
Yes, absolutely.
This is an agreed upon illusion by all means of physics.
In the universe is connected with every other point in the universe. That was Ben Rich, who is head of Lockheed Skunk Works, what he said about ESP.
Well, even the root. The paper that Hal Puthoff put out that began the work of remote viewing was the fact that when scientists went home and thought about their experiment, that they were affecting their experiment in the lab.
Yeah, that's true.
So
you are not outside of the experience.
No different than
you're not looking
we're getting ready for a paranormal experience. We're getting hyped. Are we actively charging that location that we are going to?
Yeah, I believe so.
And I think even as an investigator, you have to come dispassionately to the points of datum and add them to your data set. Mm-hmm. You can't go in, and it's hard. It's hard to become dispassionate. It's hard to disconnect yourself from the moment, to disconnect yourself in a way from somebody's experience, to look at it from an outside point of view, even when you're an experiencer, Earl. Mm-hmm. I think that makes it even harder.
Yeah,
because you've got to drop your own bias.
You have to try to your best ability to not bring in your own judgments and ideas. Yeah, because that can affect the results that you get.
Absolutely.
And what I tell a lot of my new field investigators is that just remember that if you poke at the phenomena, don't be surprised if it pokes back.
Yeah, it's a fully responsive phenomena, and that is exactly what they're doing on Blind Frog Ranch, on Skinwalker Ranch. All that is.
But there's a beauty.
They're poking. They're poking.
Yeah, they are.
Interesting to see the pokes back that happens. So.
Being poked back. Absolutely.
Earl, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to finally sit down and talk to you like this. I've got to have you on the show regularly.
Yeah,
look there at the camera. Let everybody know where they can go to get involved. Let them know where they can go to contact the ERT if they are an experiencer.
Yes. If you go to MUFON.com, MUFON, it's a mutual UFO network. you'll be given a choice, 2 buttons that you can click on: report a UFO or report an entity. If the things that I've been talking about sound familiar to you, click on report an entity. You'll get a set of questions, and somebody like myself, or maybe even me, will get a hold of you. A non-judgmental listener who is well aware that this is a real thing will take you seriously, can put you in contact with a support group if you desire that. We have a list of vetted hypnotherapists if you have missing memories from missing time experience. And I highly recommend it, because the ERT is just an amazingly educated, but yet magically just compassionate, wonderful, open group of people. And so that's how you can do it. And I recommend it. I wish that I had known about that.
Yeah.
I wish it had been available 8 years ago when I was so confused.
Yeah.
But it is there, and it's for you. It's for you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again for your time today during this very busy
Chris.
MUFON Symposium. It's
the
been
best
fantastic.
one ever. Yeah.
It's been fantastic. It's a great crowd.
Yeah.
While you're online checking out everything from Earl Grey and MUFON at MUFON.com, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can listen to the show. That's where you can like, follow, subscribe, share. That's where you can find the store full of all the books from our guests. It's where you can find our experiencer page. CuriousRealm.com/story. If you're an experiencer, if you're a government whistleblower, if you have had an encounter with cryptids or aliens, give us your experience. We have a forum there where you can share your information, share your evidence as well, and we will present it to our professionals and see if we can get you answers for your case. Stay tuned through these commercial messages, folks. We will be right back with our continuing coverage of Day 2 of the MUFON Symposium here in Covington, Kentucky, right after this.